Wife of a Crips member is arrested to reveal secrets. The outcome is shocking. Los Angeles never sleeps. It breathes in the darkness, exhales in neon lights, and bleeds in the spaces between. Tonight, it was bleeding more than usual. The clock had just hit 11:47 p.m. when the convoy of unmarked police SUVs cut through the streets of South Central. Their engines roared, echoing through the graffiti-stained alleyways. Inside the lead vehicle, Lieutenant Ethan Calloway adjusted the strap of his bulletproof vest, his fingers tightening over the grip of his Glock. The mission was clean-cut, but something about it felt wrong. "Targets inside, we move on my go," Ethan said into his radio. His partner, Detective Ryan Fletcher, exhaled sharply. "You sure about this? If we grab Jamal Carter tonight, there's no going back. The Crips will come at us with everything they got." Ethan didn't flinch. "We let him walk, and the city burns either way. We take him in." Ryan didn't argue. The decision had already been made. 2 blocks away, in a dimly lit apartment, Aisha Carter sat on her couch, flipping through the TV channels. The news anchor's voice crackled through the screen, talking about gang violence surging through the city, the same violence she had spent her whole life trying to ignore. But tonight, the war would come straight to her doorstep. She glanced at her phone. Jamal was late. He had said he'd be home by 11. Aisha bit her lip, a nervous habit from childhood, but she quickly shook it off. He was careful, he always was. But careful wouldn't be enough tonight. The raid. The police hit the door hard. The steel frame cracked as the battering ram struck it again, then again. Boom, boom. Aisha gasped, instinctively backing away as the lock finally gave in. "Eyes on target!" a voice roared. Chaos erupted. Jamal was already on his feet reaching for his gun, but before he could grab it, Ethan was on him. The lieutenant slammed Jamal against the wall, twisting his arm behind his back. "Don't even think about it," Ethan growled. Jamal struggled, but he wasn't stupid. He could see the red laser. Dots dancing on his chest. He was outnumbered, outgunned. He locked eyes with Aisha as she stood frozen. "Baby, don't say a word," he muttered. Aisha's heart pounded. She wanted to scream, to fight, to do something, but she knew what happened to people who resisted cops in this city. "Jamal Carter," Ethan said, yanking the man's hands behind his back. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and murder. You have the right to remain silent." Jamal smirked, his gold tooth flashing under the dim light. Yeah, like I never heard that before." Aisha's nails dug into her palms. She wanted to run to him to grab his arm and pull him back, but the guns told her not to. Then something changed. Ethan looked at her. "You're coming with us too, Mrs. Carter." Her stomach dropped. "What? You think we don't know? You've been in the middle of this for too long, Aisha." Ethan's voice was cold, calculated. "And if you don't start talking, you'll be the one doing time while your husband walks free." The words hit harder than the police battering ram. The officers started moving, but before they could drag her away, Jamal lunged. "You leave her out of this." Bang. The gunshot rang, unshot. Through the room. Aisha screamed. Jamal collapsed to his knees. Blood spread across his shoulder. Not fatal, but enough to drop him. Ethan exhaled, his gun still smoking. "Stay down." Jamal gritted his teeth, his breathing ragged. "This ain't over." Aisha felt the cold steel of handcuffs bite her wrists as she was yanked forward. The last thing she saw before being shoved into the back of the squad car was Jamal, bleeding, but still glaring like a man who had nothing to lose. And just like that, her world fell apart. The beginning of the end. The station was cold, sterile. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Aisha sat handcuffed to the table. Across from her, Ethan watched her carefully. "You can make this easy, Aisha. You talk, and you walk." She swallowed hard. "I don't know anything." Ethan leaned forward. "You're lying." Silence. "You think Jamal's gonna protect you from behind? Bars? You think Malik Johnson won't take over and turn on you the second he smells weakness?" Aisha's jaw tightened. Ethan sighed. Look, you help us, and we make sure you're safe. Witness protection, a new life. She laughed bitterly. You really think I'm stupid? If I talk, I'm dead before the week's out. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Then he said something that made her blood run cold. You're already dead if you don't. The words hung in the air like smoke. Aisha felt her throat tighten. She looked away, her mind racing. What was she supposed to do? Betray the man she loved, or risk everything staying loyal? Before she could answer, the door burst open. Detective Ryan Fletcher rushed in, his face pale. Lieutenant, we got a problem. Ethan frowned. What is it? Ryan's voice was grave. The Crips know we took her. Aisha's breath caught. Ethan tensed. How the hell? We got a leak. Someone inside tipped them off. Ryan glanced at Aisha, then back at Ethan. And now Malik Johnson wants her back. The air in the room shifted. Ethan turned to Aisha, his face unreadable. Well, looks like we just ran out of time. Aisha's pulse thundered in her ears. She had a terrible feeling. Something bad was coming. And this was only the beginning. Before we embark on this story, write down where you're watching from in the comments. Let's go. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into Aisha Carter's wrists. Her heartbeat pounded against her ribs like a drum, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. They knew. The Crips knew she had been taken. And that meant one thing. She was a walking dead woman. Lieutenant Ethan Calloway sat across from her, his eyes sharp, calculating. He was a hunter. She could see it in the way he watched her, waiting for the slightest movement that would confirm what he already believed, that she knew more than she was letting on. Detective Ryan Fletcher stood near the door, his arms crossed, shifting uneasily. We gotta move her, Ethan. Now. Ethan exhaled, rubbing his temple. Where the hell is the leak coming from? Doesn't matter. What matters is that Malik's already making moves. Ryan said. We intercepted chatter. He put out a call. Any cop, any fed, any snitch that gets in his way is dead. Aisha swallowed hard. Then we don't have much time, Ethan said, standing. We need to get her to a secure location before… Boom. The entire building shook. The lights flickered. Aisha's head snapped up. What the hell was that? Jesus Christ, Ryan muttered, already reaching for his gun. A voice crackled over the radio, frantic, panicked. Shots fired, we're under attack. Ethan grabbed the radio. What's the situation? Who's attacking? Multiple hostiles, armed. Men, shit, they're inside, repeat, they're inside. The line cut. Silence and then screaming. Aisha's stomach dropped. Ethan and Ryan moved fast. The lieutenant yanked Aisha out of the chair, his grip like iron on her arm. We need to go. Now. Ambush. The hallway was chaos. Officers were shouting, running for cover. The air reeked of gunpowder as bullets tore through walls, sending sparks and debris flying. Malik Johnson's men were already inside, and they weren't here to negotiate. Aisha struggled against Ethan's grip. Let me go. You want to die? He snapped. Because that's exactly what's about to happen if you don't shut up and move. She gritted her teeth but didn't resist. Ryan was ahead, clearing the path. Garage is the only way out. Ethan pushed her forward, moving fast, his gun drawn. The station was built like a fortress, but it wasn't supposed to be attacked from the inside. Officers were down. Blood slicked the floor. The flashing emergency lights painted everything in a sickening red glow. And then, there! Take them out! 3 masked men turned the corner, guns blazing. Bang! 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 Ryan fired first, dropping one of them before he could react. Ethan shoved Aisha against the wall, using his body as cover. Stay down! The second gunman charged forward, but Ethan was faster. He put 2 bullets in his chest, and the man collapsed. The third shooter hesitated, just a second too long. A fatal mistake. Bang! Ryan's bullet found his skull. He hit the ground. Unmoving. Silence. The only sound left was the distant echoes of gunfire and the heavy breathing of the three standing. Aisha's ears rang. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't built for this. "Move!" Ethan barked, grabbing her again. They rushed down the hall, weaving through the carnage, stepping over bodies. When they reached the door to the garage, Ryan swiped his keycard. Nothing. He cursed. "Power's out. It's on lockdown." Ethan turned to Aisha. "You trust me?" She blinked. "No." "Too bad." Before she could react, he pulled his gun and shot the control panel. The doors groaned, struggling against the lockdown. But then finally they slid open just enough to squeeze through. "Go." They bolted. The underground garage was dark, filled with shadows. Patrol cars sat in neat rows, their engines silent. The exit ramp was barely visible, but it was their only chance. Ryan spotted an SUV. There. They ran for it. Ethan shoved Aisha inside, throwing himself into the driver's seat while Ryan jumped in the passenger side. The moment the doors slammed shut, gunfire erupted. "Shit, shit, shit!" Ryan shouted, ducking as bullets shattered the windshield. Ethan slammed his foot on the gas. The tires screeched against the concrete. The SUV lurched forward, straight toward the exit ramp. The gunman scrambled to get out of the way. The SUV burst onto the street, tires screeching as it swerved into traffic. Ethan gritted his teeth, gripping the wheel as the city lights blurred. Past. Aisha gasped for breath. Where are we going?" Ethan's jaw was tight. "Somewhere safe." Ryan glanced at the side mirror. "We got company." Aisha turned, and her heart stopped. Black SUVs, no plates, coming up fast. The Crips weren't done. The chase was only beginning. Join us on this journey. Before we start, share your location in the comments and enjoy the experience. The city blurred past in a mess of neon and streetlights as Ethan gripped the wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The SUV roared down the empty roads, its tires skidding against the asphalt as he swerved between traffic, dodging bullets that screamed through the air. The Crips weren't just chasing them, they were hunting them. Aisha's hands trembled as she clutched the seatbelt, her breath coming in short gasps. Her world had flipped in a matter of hours, and now she was caught in something, and she couldn't escape. Ryan checked the side mirror. "They're gaining on us." Ethan's eyes flicked up. 3 black SUVs, no plates. The Crips had come prepared. "How many?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice calm. Ryan loaded his gun. "Too many," Aisha snapped. "You said I'd be safe," she shouted, panic lacing her voice. "You said I had a choice. What the hell kind of choice is this?" Ethan didn't take his eyes off the road. "Your choice is whether you make it out alive or not." She wanted to scream. Instead, she dug her nails into her palms and forced herself to breathe. In, out. But then, crash! The first SUV rammed into them from behind, the impact jerking them forward. Aisha's head snapped back against the seat. Ryan cursed. "We gotta lose them." Ethan didn't hesitate. He yanked the wheel hard to the right, cutting through a narrow alleyway. Trash cans flew into the air, glass shattered, but the SUVs followed. Aisha's stomach twisted. There was no escape. Then, a glimpse of hope. Ethan spotted a construction site up ahead, the entrance barely wide enough for a car to squeeze through. "We go in, they won't follow," he said. Ryan gave him a look. "Or we get stuck and die." "Yeah, well, I like our odds." Ethan hit the gas. The SUV shot forward, barely squeezing through the gap in the construction barriers. Concrete dust exploded around them. Behind them, tires screeched as the first Crip vehicle tried to follow, and failed. Crash. The black SUV slammed into the steel beams, flipping onto its side. Flames erupted as metal crunched. One down. The second SUV hesitated, giving them just enough time. "Hold on," Ethan warned. He spun the wheel, sending them flying down a narrow street. The last Crip car was still on them, but they had gained precious seconds. Ethan saw what he needed, a freeway entrance. He gunned it. They shot onto the highway, weaving through late-night traffic. The remaining SUV tried to keep up, but city streets and freeways were two different battlefields. They took the next exit, cutting through an industrial area, and finally, the headlights behind them disappeared. Silence filled the car. The only sound was Aisha's heavy breathing. She turned slowly, her hands still shaking. What now? Ethan didn't answer. He drove another 3 blocks, turned twice, then finally pulled into an abandoned warehouse. He killed the engine. The 3 of them sat there, catching their breath. Ryan was the first to speak. That was too close. Aisha let out a sharp laugh, the kind people make when they're too scared to cry. Too close? That was insane. You almost got us killed. Ethan turned to her. And yet, here we are. She clenched her fists. You don't get it. You think this is over? It's not. Malik won't stop until he gets what he wants. Ethan leaned back, studying her. And what does he want, Aisha? She hesitated, and that's when Ethan knew. She did know something. She looked away. I need to get out of here. Ryan scoffed. Where exactly do you think you're going to go? Aisha swallowed hard. She didn't know. Ethan's voice softened, just slightly. You help us, we help you. That's the only way this ends with you breathing. Aisha closed her eyes. Everything in her wanted to run, but where? Her husband was locked. Up. The Crips wanted her dead. The cops didn't trust her. She had no one. And then, before she could answer, a single phone buzzed. Ryan checked the screen. His face went pale. What? Ethan asked. Ryan slowly turned the phone toward them. The screen showed a picture, Aisha's apartment, and spray painted across the walls, big, red, and dripping like fresh blood. She's dead already. Aisha's breath caught. Her hands turned ice cold. This wasn't just a threat. This was a promise. And Malik never broke promises. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey. The silence inside the SUV was suffocating. Aisha Carter stared at the picture on Ryan's phone, her vision blurring at the edges. The image of her apartment, defaced, violated, marked for death, burned into her mind like a brand. She had nowhere left to run. Ethan Calloway's jaw was clenched tight. He had seen messages like this before. Gang warnings weren't just words, they were death sentences. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. They know where she lives, if she had any chance of going. Back, it's gone now. Aisha let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. You don't have to tell me that. Her apartment wasn't just her home, it was her last piece of normal, and now, it was gone. Ethan turned the engine back on. We need to get out of here before they find us again. Aisha snapped her head toward him. And go where? Somewhere safe. A humorless laugh escaped her lips. Safe? You don't get it. There's no safe anymore. They won't stop until I'm dead. Ethan's voice was low, steady. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. Aisha met his gaze. Something about the way he said it made her believe him. She let out a slow breath, gripping the seatbelt. Fine, but if you're gonna play hero, you better have a plan. Ethan pressed down on the gas, and the SUV rolled forward into the darkness. Malik makes his move south central, 2:15 a.m. Malik Ace Johnson stood in the middle of an empty warehouse, his fingers tapping against his gold-plated watch. The air was thick with tension. Around him, 5 of his best soldiers stood silent, their guns loaded, their eyes locked on the man standing in front of them. The Rat. Officer Daniel Vargas shifted on his feet, wiping the sweat from his brow. He had been working with the Crips for years, feeding them intel, making sure the heat never got too close. But tonight was different. Malik's deep, measured voice broke the silence. Tell me again how they got away. Vargas swallowed. I don't know, man. They moved fast. Calloway's good. Malik nodded slowly. Yeah, Calloway is good. But you know what's funny? Vargas forced a nervous smile. What's that? Malik took a step forward, his voice deadly calm. You're supposed to be better. Vargas's throat went dry. Malik, man, I did everything I could. Did you? Malik cut him off. 'Cause last I checked, that cop still has my man's wife. And my man? He's sitting in a goddamn cell while she's out here breathing. Vargas held up his hands. Look, I can fix this. Give me another chance. Malik studied him for a moment, then, bang. Vargas's body hit the ground before he could even register what had happened. Blood pooled beneath him, his eyes still wide in shock. Malik tucked his gun back into his waistband and turned to his men. I'm done with leaks. Find them. End this. His second-in-command, Drayvon, nodded. And the girl? Malik's lips curved into a slow, merciless smile. She dies last. A temporary refuge. Ethan pulled into a dimly lit motel off the freeway, far enough from the city to be off the radar. The neon sign flickered, casting a sickly glow over the cracked pavement. He killed the engine and turned to Ryan. We'll stay here for the night. Swap cars in the morning. Ryan grunted. This place is a dump. It's a safe dump. Aisha exhaled sharply. And if they find us here? Ethan met her eyes. Then we handle it. She shook her head. You keep saying that like you have a real plan. Ethan opened the door. I do. Stay alive. Aisha rolled her eyes but followed him inside. The motel reeked of cigarette smoke and broken dreams. The walls were thin, the carpet stained. Ethan handed cash to the guy at the front desk, an older man who barely looked up, then took the key and led them down the hall. Room 206. Ryan checked the room first. Clear. Aisha stepped inside, wrapping her arms around herself. The air conditioner rattled in the corner, spitting out lukewarm air. She sank onto the edge of the bed. Exhaustion hit her like a freight train. Ethan pulled a chair to the window, watching the parking lot. Ryan leaned against the dresser, gun resting on his thigh. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, softly, Aisha broke the silence. Jamal knew this was coming. Ethan glanced at her. She stared at the floor. He told me. Said if the cops ever got him, it wasn't just about him, it was about all of us. Said there were things I didn't know, things he kept from me to keep me safe. Her voice wavered. He told me to run. Ryan folded his arms. And yet, here you are. Aisha swallowed. I stayed because I thought if I acted like I was normal, like I wasn't part of this life, maybe they'd let me go. She let out a bitter laugh. Guess I was wrong. Ethan studied her carefully. You're saying Jamal knew something bigger was coming? Aisha hesitated. And then, she nodded. He told me that if he went down, Malik wouldn't just take over. She lifted her eyes, and for the first time there was real fear in them. He said Malik was working with someone bigger, someone worse. Ethan's expression darkened. Who? Aisha shook her head. I don't know. Jamal never told me names. Just that, if the wrong people found out what he knew, it wouldn't be the streets that burned. Ryan frowned. What the hell does that mean? Aisha's lips parted as if she were about to answer. Then, a shadow moved outside the window. Ethan's body tensed. The silence shifted. Then, bang, bang, bang. Gunfire ripped through the motel walls. Ryan grabbed Aisha and hit the floor as bullets shredded through the air. Ethan rolled, gun raised, returning fire. Outside, footsteps pounded against the pavement. Multiple shooters moving fast. Ryan cursed. They found us. Aisha pressed her hands over her ears, her heartbeat a wild drumbeat in her chest. Ethan fired twice. A shadow dropped, but more were coming. They had minutes, maybe seconds. Ryan locked eyes with Ethan. What's the move? Ethan clenched his jaw. We don't die here. He grabbed Aisha's wrist. We move on my go. Aisha's breath was ragged. And if we don't make it? Ethan's grip tightened. Then we make sure they don't either. Before we get started, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Let's go. Gunfire tore through the motel walls. The air crackled with bullets, drywall exploding into dust and debris. Aisha Carter pressed herself against the floor, her pulse hammering against her ribs. She wasn't breathing. She was surviving. Ethan Calloway reloaded his Glock with practiced speed. One magazine left. Ryan Fletcher crouched near the door, gun ready, eyes locked on Ethan. "We gotta move," Ryan said, voice tight. Ethan's gaze flicked to Aisha. She was shaking. He didn't blame her. She wasn't built for this. But there was no time for fear. "We're going out the back," Ethan said. Ryan peeked through the window. "Bad news. There's at least 4 of them in the lot. More coming up the hallway, too," Ethan muttered. Aisha felt her stomach churn. They were surrounded. Her fingers dug into the filthy carpet. "What do we do?" Ethan exhaled sharply, glancing at Ryan. "Buy ourselves a window." Ryan's expression darkened. "How?" Ethan grabbed the motel's old buzzing lamp, ripped the cord free, and smashed the bulb against the table. Sparks jumped. Aisha's eyes widened. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan turned toward the curtains. "Evening the odds." He yanked them down, revealing the grimy window full of bullet holes. Then, he grabbed the motel bed, flipped it onto its side, and shoved it against the door. Ryan caught on immediately. "Ah, hell," Ryan muttered, grabbing a chair. He jammed it under the door handle, reinforcing their makeshift barricade. Ethan grabbed his lighter. Aisha's breath caught. "No, no, no." Whoosh. He touched the flame to the tattered curtain fabric. The window exploded into fire. Ryan grabbed Aisha's arm. "Move!" The hallway door slammed open. The bed pushed back under the weight of 2 men trying to force their way in. Aisha's heart climbed into her throat. The fire grew fast, licking up the wall, smoke curling toward the ceiling. "Now!" Ethan barked. "Bang! Bang! Bang!" Ryan fired toward the door, forcing the gunman back. Ethan grabbed Aisha's wrist and yanked her toward the flames. She screamed. But Ethan didn't stop. He took a step back, then launched himself through the burning window. Glass shattered. Heat roared against Aisha's skin. Then, she was airborne. The world spun, and then pain. She hit the pavement hard, the impact rattling through her bones. She gasped, rolling onto her hands and knees. Her palms were bleeding. Her heart felt like it was trying to climb out of her chest. Ethan was already up, grabbing Ryan as he tumbled through the flames behind them. No time to stop. They took off. The escape. They ran. The gunmen were recovering. Shouts filled the air. Aisha's lungs burned. Every step sent lightning through her legs, but she forced herself to keep going. The alley behind the motel was dark, but Ethan had planned for this. He knew the city like a battlefield. "Keep moving," he ordered. Ryan was bleeding. Aisha didn't know where, but his breathing was sharp, his steps uneven. Ethan's eyes scanned the street, then locked onto an old, beat-up station wagon. "That's our ride." Aisha nearly collapsed. "You're joking." Ethan ignored her. He reached under the front wheel well, found the spare key, and yanked the door open. Aisha's jaw dropped. "You had a car waiting?" "Always have a backup plan," Ethan grunted. Ryan shoved himself into the passenger seat. Less talking, more driving. Ethan floored the gas. Tires screeched. The wagon jolted forward, kicking up gravel. Aisha twisted in her seat. Looking back, the motel was glowing orange now, flames licking at the night sky. Malik's men spilled into the parking lot, watching them escape. One of them lifted a phone. Aisha's stomach dropped. "They're calling for backup." Ethan's jaw tensed. "Let them." He gunned it into the night. Nowhere is safe. The wagon rumbled down a deserted highway, the city lights fading behind them. Ethan's hands were tight on the wheel. Ryan was pressing a bloody rag to his arm. Aisha sat in the back, arms wrapped around herself. Her body wouldn't stop shaking. She had been hunted before, followed home, watched, but never like this. Never with her life on the line. "You okay?" Ryan asked, his voice softer than usual. Aisha let out a breath. "Do I look okay?" Ryan almost smiled. "Fair point." Ethan spoke without taking his eyes off the road. "We can't stay in the city. Too many eyes. We need to disappear." Ryan frowned. "Where?" Ethan hesitated, and then for the first time that night he looked unsure. Aisha caught it. "You don't know, do you?" Ethan's jaw ticked. "We'll figure it out." Aisha let out a bitter laugh. "You act like I have all this time. I don't. Malik won't stop. And if he's working with someone bigger." She hesitated. Ethan glanced at her through the mirror. "You gonna finish that thought?" Aisha exhaled. "Jamal knew something, Ethan. Something about Malik. Said if he ever got taken, it wasn't just about gang control. There was something bigger happening." Ryan frowned. "Bigger than a Crip takeover?" Aisha hesitated. "Yeah." Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. "Like what?" She shook her head. "I don't know. But Jamal was scared. And Jamal doesn't scare easy." The words hung in the air. Ethan exchanged a glance with Ryan. This was worse than they thought. And then, Ryan's phone buzzed. Aisha stiffened. Ethan didn't take his eyes off the road. "Who is it?" Ryan checked the screen. His face went pale. Aisha's pulse spiked. "Ryan?" Slowly, he turned the phone around. It was a text message, and it was a picture. Aisha felt her blood run cold. The image was of Jamal Carter, inside his prison cell. His face was beaten, bloody, and above him, scrawled on the wall in his own blood, "She betrayed you." Aisha's breath hitched, her vision blurred. Ryan cursed under his breath. Ethan's voice was calm, too calm. "When was this sent?" Ryan checked the timestamp. 2 minutes ago. The weight of those words crushed Aisha's chest. 2 minutes ago. That meant whoever sent this, they knew exactly where they were. Ethan slammed on the brakes. Ryan whirled around. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan's face was stone. "We're not alone." Aisha's breath turned to ice. She turned slowly. And there, out in the darkness, parked at the side of the road, a single car. Its headlights flashed once, then again. Aisha's fingers dug into the seat. They had found them. Before we get started, let us know where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment and enjoy the journey. The road stretched out into pure darkness. The only thing breaking the silence was the low, eerie hum of the engine idling across the road. A single black sedan. Its headlights flashed twice. They weren't alone. Aisha Carter's pulse thundered in her ears. Every cell in her body screamed to run. But there was nowhere left to go. Ethan Calloway's hands tightened around the steering wheel. "They found us." Ryan Fletcher pulled his gun, flicking the safety off. "Think they're waiting for backup?" Ethan didn't answer, because he already knew the truth. They weren't waiting. The first bullet whistled through the air before Ethan even saw the gunman. Bang! The driver's side window exploded in a spray of glass. "Get down!" Ethan roared, throwing the SUV into reverse. Ryan fired back, sending bullets tearing into the darkness. Aisha let out a sharp cry, pressing herself into the back seat as the world erupted into chaos. The black sedan lurched forward, its tires screaming against the pavement as it closed the distance. Aisha's stomach twisted. They weren't just chasing them. They were trying to ram them off the road. "Ethan, move!" Ryan shouted. Ethan didn't hesitate. He yanked the wheel hard to the right, just as the sedan slammed into their rear bumper. The force sent their SUV skidding sideways, tires screeching. Aisha's head slammed against the window. Stars exploded in her vision. The SUV spun out. The black sedan circled them like a shark, its engine growling. The driver wasn't running. He was playing. Aisha barely had time to register it before the driver's side door swung open. A man stepped out. Tall, broad shoulders, dressed in all black with a slow, deliberate gait, like a predator sizing up its kill. And when the headlights hit his face, Aisha forgot how to breathe, because she knew exactly who he was. Dre Vaughn, Malik's right-hand man. And if Dre was here, that meant one thing. Malik was done waiting. Face to face with death, Dre adjusted his gloves, his eyes scanning the SUV like he had all the time in the world. He wasn't in a hurry. That meant he wasn't just here to kill them. He was here to send a message. Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt. Ryan? Ryan kept his gun leveled, but his breathing was tense. Yeah? You got my back? Ryan smirked, but there was no humor behind it. Like you gotta ask. Ethan exhaled, then looked at Aisha. Stay down. Before she could protest, he opened the door. Aisha grabbed his arm. You're walking into a death trap. Ethan didn't look at her. Not if I walk out first. Then he was gone, stepping into the night. Ryan followed. Aisha's hands were shaking. Her world had already spiraled out of control. But this was suicide. And yet, she couldn't look away. Ethan squared up to Dre, hands loose at his sides. Didn't think Malik would send his lapdog to do his dirty work. Dre smiled. You got a mouth for a dead man. Ethan shrugged. You got a big ego for a backup dancer. Ryan choked on a laugh. Oh, he's gonna kill you for that one. Dre's smile faded. His fingers tensed, and then, in a flash, he moved. Ethan was ready. Dre swung first, a brutal right hook aimed at Ethan's jaw. Ethan dodged, countering with a sharp elbow to Dre's ribs. Dre grunted, barely reacting before he slammed his knee into Ethan's gut. Pain exploded in Ethan's ribs. He staggered back, but before Dre could capitalize, Ryan fired a warning shot into the air. Dre's men, two more stepping from the sedan, stopped. Cold. Back off, Ryan warned, gun steady. Dre wiped a speck of blood from his lip. This ain't a fight you win, cop. Ethan exhaled. He knew that. But this wasn't about winning. It was about surviving. You got two choices, Ethan said. Walk away or start a war. Dre tilted his head. Wars. Already started. And then, a buzz. Dre checked his phone, a short text. Aisha watched his expression shift. Something had changed. Dre clicked his tongue, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Guess you got lucky tonight, Calloway. Ethan narrowed his eyes. You're leaving? Dre smiled, backing toward his car. Not my call. Aisha's pulse spiked. Not his call? That meant someone else was pulling the strings. Dre nodded toward Aisha. See you soon, sweetheart. Then he climbed into the sedan. The engine growled. And then, they were gone. Something bigger. The silence after was deafening. Ryan holstered his gun. What the hell was that? Ethan wiped blood from his lip. They were gonna kill us. Yeah, and then they just left. Aisha swallowed hard. Her whole body was trembling. They got a call, she murmured. Someone told them to stop. Ryan frowned. Malik? Aisha shook her head. No. Malik wouldn't back down. Not after everything. Ethan turned to her. Then who? She didn't know. But she was starting to understand. Jamal had warned her. This wasn't just about gang power. This was about something bigger. And whoever was behind it, they were watching, waiting. And Aisha was right in the middle of it. She looked at Ethan. For the first time, she wasn't just running from the Crips. She was running from something else. Something worse. And if they didn't figure it out soon, none of them would make it out alive. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey. The road stretched before them, endless and empty. The SUV hummed softly as Ethan Calloway drove, his fingers tight on the wheel. The weight of the last hour clung to the air like smoke. Dre Vaughn had them, and then he let them go. Ryan Fletcher sat in the passenger seat, rubbing his jaw. This isn't sitting right. Aisha Carter sat in the back, arms wrapped around herself. No kidding. Ryan glanced at Ethan. We should be dead right now. Ethan didn't respond. Because he was thinking the same thing. He should have been dead the second Dre stepped out of that car. But something changed. Dre got a phone call, and then he walked away. Aisha shifted uncomfortably. Someone stopped him. Ryan frowned. Malik? No, Aisha said, shaking her head. Malik doesn't back down, not after sending that message to me. Ryan exhaled. Then who the hell pulled the leash? The car fell into silence. And that's when Aisha knew. They didn't have the answer. But whoever was playing this game, they were already 3 steps ahead. Jamal's warning. The SUV pulled into an abandoned gas station off the highway. They couldn't risk staying in one place too long. Ethan killed the engine and turned to Aisha. You need to start talking. Aisha tensed. I already told you I don't know. Ethan cut her off. You know more than you think. Aisha clenched her jaw. Ryan leaned back against the door. Look, Aisha, I get it. You don't trust cops, and honestly, probably a smart call, but right now the only way you stay alive is if we figure out what the hell is going on. Aisha exhaled. And then, she finally spoke. Jamal knew something. Ethan leaned in. About what? Aisha's fingers curled into fists. He told me that if he ever got arrested, it wouldn't just be the Crips fighting for power. He said, she hesitated. He said they would make their move. Ryan frowned. They? Aisha nodded. Jamal never told me who. Just that there were people working behind the scenes, and if the wrong people found out what he knew. Her voice wavered. She didn't have to finish the sentence. Ethan studied her. And what did he know? Aisha swallowed. I don't know. Ryan let out a sharp breath. You gotta give us more than that. Aisha lifted her head, and when she did, there was fire and there was her eyes. You think I'd be running if I knew? She snapped. You think I'd be sitting in this car with 2 cops if I had any idea what was coming? Ryan blinked. For the first time, he saw it. Aisha wasn't just scared. She was terrified. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then finally, he reached into his pocket. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Aisha's breath hitched, because staring back at her was the picture of Jamal, bloodied, broken, and above him, scrawled on the wall, "She betrayed you." Her heart twisted. Ethan's voice was low. Do you think he's still alive? Aisha's fingers tightened on her seatbelt. Jamal Carter was many things. A gangster, a fighter, a leader. But above all, he was a survivor. Aisha lifted her chin. If he's still breathing, he's fighting. Ethan nodded. Then we need to find him before Malik does. Aisha frowned. Find him? He's in prison. Ryan smirked. Yeah, for now. Aisha's stomach dropped. You're saying you're gonna break him out? Ethan didn't blink. I'm saying it's the only way we end this. The prison move LA County Jail, 3:45 a.m. The air inside smelled like sweat, blood, and bad decisions. Jamal Carter sat on the edge of his cot, breathing slow. His shoulder still burned from where that cop shot him. But that pain? That was nothing compared to what was coming. The cell door creaked open. Jamal didn't move. He already knew who it was. A pair of shined shoes stepped inside. A low chuckle. And then, a voice he hated. Jamal, you look like shit, brother. Jamal lifted his head, and there, standing in the dim light, was Malik Johnson, his best friend, his enemy. Jamal rolled his shoulder. You come to visit, or you come to finish the job? Malik smirked. That depends. You ready to beg? Jamal chuckled, shaking his head. You always were a dumbass. Malik's smile faded. He stepped closer. I gave you everything, man. You were supposed to be my right hand. And what did you do? Jamal met his gaze. I built something bigger. Malik's eyes flashed. And that's when Jamal knew. This wasn't a visit. This was an execution. Malik's voice dropped. You got one chance, Ghost. Tell me what you told the cops. Jamal smiled. I didn't tell them shit. Malik studied him for a long moment. Then, he sighed. Shame. The door creaked open again. 2 men stepped inside. One of them pulled a shank from his sleeve. Jamal's stomach turned to ice. Malik patted his shoulder. Night, brother. Then he was gone. The door locked behind him. Jamal took a slow breath. And then, the first man lunged. Back on the outside, Aisha's leg bounced in the SUV. How the hell are we supposed to break into a prison? Ryan smirked. We don't. Ethan glanced at the clock. 4 a.m. He looked at Aisha. We let them bring him to us. Aisha stiffened. Ethan's jaw tightened. They're gonna kill him. Malik won't leave him breathing. Ryan nodded. Which means they'll try to move him. Aisha frowned. Move him where? Ethan's eyes met. Hers. Wherever they dump dead bodies. Aisha's heart stopped. Ryan checked his watch. We got one shot at this. Ethan started the car. Then let's make it count. And just like that, the jailbreak had begun. Before we embark on this story, write down where you're watching from in the comments. Let's go. LA County Jail. 4:12 a.m. Jamal Carter's breath came ragged and uneven. Blood dripped from his knuckles. His right eye was already swelling shut. His lip was split open. And the 2 men who came to kill him. They were lying on the floor. One was unconscious, the other was bleeding out. Jamal spat blood onto the concrete. You should have brought more guys. Outside the cell, shouting erupted. Correctional officers were rushing in. He was out of time. And Jamal Carter knew one thing. If he stayed here, he was already dead. On the outside, the SUV rumbled down the darkened freeway, headlights slicing through the night. Ethan Calloway gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. We're running out of time, Ryan Fletcher muttered, checking his phone. If Malik sent hitters inside, they're gonna clean this up fast. Aisha Carter's stomach was in knots. So what's the plan? Ethan's eyes didn't leave the road. Prison transfers happen between 4:30 and 5 a.m. If Malik has someone on the inside, they'll use that window to move Jamal before the cops realize what's happening. Ryan nodded. Which means we don't break him out. We hijack the move. Aisha's throat tightened. You're saying we ambush a prison transport? Ethan's voice was calm. Too calm. I'm saying if we don't, Jamal dies before sunrise. Aisha swallowed hard. She didn't trust Ethan. She didn't trust Ryan. But the truth was, she didn't have a choice. Because if Jamal died, so did her last chance at finding out who was really pulling the strings. She exhaled sharply. Where do we do this? Ryan smirked. We know exactly where they're going to take him. The kill zone, 4:29 a.m. A desolate stretch of road outside the city, the industrial district was silent at this hour. No traffic, no lights, no one watching. Perfect place for a clean execution. Ethan pulled the SUV into position behind an abandoned warehouse. Ryan checked his watch. They should be rolling through in the next 3 minutes. Aisha wiped her palms against her jeans. And if we're wrong? Ethan didn't look at her. We're not. Aisha bit her lip. This was insane. Hijacking a prison transport? Fighting off Malik's men? If this went wrong, they were all dead. Ryan crouched near the road, laying down a set of spike strips. Ethan chambered around. In his Glock. Aisha's pulse pounded. And then, headlights appeared in the distance. Ryan grinned. Showtime. The ambush. The armored prison transport rumbled down the road, flanked by 2 black SUVs. Aisha's breath hitched. That's not LAPD, she murmured. Ethan's jaw tightened. No, it's not. Malik wasn't just pulling strings. He had his own damn transport. Ryan exhaled. Guess that means they're not taking him to another prison. Ethan's grip on his gun tightened. No, they're taking him somewhere to die. The transport hit the spike strips. Tires exploded. The armored truck lurched forward, the driver fighting for control. Ethan gunned the SUV, shooting out onto the road. Bang! Bang! Ryan opened fire, taking out the lead SUV's driver. The black vehicle veered off the road, flipping into a ditch. The second escort car skidded sideways. Malik's men poured out, guns blazing. Aisha ducked as bullets tore through the windshield. "Get to the truck," Ethan roared. Ryan fired off cover shots as Ethan leaped from the SUV, racing for the transport. The armored doors swung open, and a guard inside raised his gun. Ethan shot first. The guard collapsed. Ethan grabbed the keys off his belt and unlocked the main compartment. Inside, Jamal Carter sat, his hands cuffed, his face bloodied. The second he saw Ethan, his eyes flashed with recognition. "Guess you're not dead yet," Jamal muttered. Ethan tossed him a switchblade. "You want to change that? Or you want to get the hell out of here?" Jamal grinned, cutting his restraints. "Let's go." Blood in the streets. The gunfight outside raged on. Malik's men were everywhere. Ryan ducked behind the SUV, reloading his magazine. "We need to move." Aisha clutched the gun Ethan had given her. She had never shot anyone in her life. But right now, she was out of options. One of Malik's men spotted her, gun raised. Aisha pulled the trigger. Bang! The man dropped. Aisha's hands shook violently. Ethan and Jamal burst out of the transport. Ryan covered them, laying down fire as they sprinted toward the SUV. Bullets whistled past. Jamal leaped into the back seat. Ethan slid into the driver's seat. Ryan jumped in last. "Drive!" Ethan slammed the gas. The SUV screeched away, tires burning against the pavement. Bullets ripped through the air, but they were already gone. The last thing Aisha saw in the rearview mirror was the look on Malik's face, and for the first time, he looked furious. The truth comes out. The SUV sped through the city, finally stopping in an abandoned parking lot. Jamal leaned forward, rubbing his wrists. "All right, somebody start talking," he said. "Why the hell did you pull me out of there?" Ethan turned in his seat. "You tell me, why did Malik try to have you killed?" Jamal's face darkened. Aisha exhaled. "Jamal, what do you know?" Jamal's jaw tightened. "You were right, Aisha," he murmured. "This ain't just about the Crips." Ethan leaned forward. "Then what is it about?" Jamal hesitated, and then he finally spoke. "You ever wonder why I never trusted Malik?" Ryan frowned. "Because he's a snake?" Jamal shook his head. "Nah, it's because he's been working with the cops for years." Aisha froze. Ethan's pulse spiked. Ryan's face went blank. "You're saying Malik's a snitch?" Jamal laughed bitterly. "Nah, man. I'm saying Malik's been playing both sides. Crips, LAPD, feds, he's got his hands in everything. And whoever's backing him?" Jamal locked eyes with Ethan. "They got more power than you can imagine." The car fell into dead silence. Aisha's hands clenched. This was bigger than the streets. Bigger than the Crips. This was corruption at the highest level. And now, they were in too deep to walk away. Ethan exhaled. "Then I guess we burn it all down." Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey. Aisha Carter felt like the world had just dropped out from under her. She sat frozen in the back seat, Jamal's words replaying over and over. Malik's been working with the cops. And whoever's backing him, they got more power than you can imagine. Ethan Calloway's face was unreadable. He sat with both hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Ryan Fletcher, on the other hand, looked like he was about to blow a fuse. "That's a hell of an accusation, Carter," Ryan muttered. Jamal leaned forward, rubbing the dried blood on his wrists. "It ain't an accusation, it's the truth." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "Start talking." Jamal let out a slow breath. "You ever heard of the black budget?" Ryan frowned. "Sounds like a conspiracy theory." Jamal chuckled, shaking his head. "Nah, man, it's real. Cops, feds, gangs, private security, they all pull from the same pot. Money moves under the table. They use it to keep certain people in power and bury everyone else. Aisha swallowed hard. And Malik? Jamal's jaw tightened. He's been part of it for years, that's why the cops never really touched him. Why he always knew when raids were coming. He was playing both sides. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Ryan scoffed. So what? Malik's just some corrupt informant? That doesn't explain why they tried to kill you in lockup. Jamal's expression darkened. Because I found out something I wasn't supposed to. Aisha felt a chill crawl down her spine. Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. What did you find? Jamal hesitated. And then he finally said it. Malik's been working for someone high up, real high up. Someone inside the LAPD. Aisha's stomach twisted. Ryan blinked. You got a name? Jamal nodded slowly. And when he spoke, the temperature in the car dropped. Captain Wallace. Silence. The name hung in the air like a death sentence. Ethan didn't react, didn't even blink. But Aisha could see the way his fingers tightened around the wheel. Wallace? Ryan muttered. You gotta be kidding me. Ethan finally spoke. How do you know? Jamal exhaled. I overheard Malik talking about it months ago. Said Wallace was the reason Malik could move product without getting touched. Said he was gonna take over the whole damn city. When I realized how deep it went, I started collecting proof, paperwork, wire transfers, even got one of Wallace's guys on tape. Ethan turned in his seat, his voice dangerously calm. You have that evidence? Jamal's expression hardened. I did. Aisha's heart dropped. Did? Jamal clenched his jaw. Before they came for me, I stashed it. Ryan cursed under his breath. Jesus Christ. Ethan's voice was cold. Where is it? Jamal hesitated. It's in a safe house. One only I know about. Ethan exhaled. Then that's our next stop. Ryan let out a humorless laugh. You think we can just waltz over there and grab it? Wallace has every dirty cop in LA on his payroll. If he knows that evidence exists, he's already looking for it. Jamal shook his head. He doesn't know where it is. Only Malik does. Aisha's pulse spiked. Then we have to move before he does. Ethan nodded. And then, softly, he said, This ends tonight. The setup 3:22 a.m., South Central LA. The streets were eerily quiet. No sirens, no traffic. Jamal directed them toward an abandoned auto shop. Faded paint, broken windows, rusted-out cars in the lot. It looked forgotten, but Aisha knew better. This is it, Jamal said. Ethan, cut the engine. We move fast in and out. Ryan loaded his gun. And if Malik's already here? Ethan met his gaze. Then we put him down. Aisha felt her throat tighten. The doors opened. The air was thick, heavy. Something felt wrong. Jamal led them through a side entrance, into the dimly lit shop. Dust covered everything. Broken tools lay scattered. And then, Jamal froze. Aisha saw it too. The safe. It was already open and empty. Her stomach dropped. No, Jamal muttered, stepping forward. No, no, no. Ethan's gun was up instantly. It's gone. Ryan cursed under his breath. Malik beat us to it. And then, a single clap echoed through the room. Slow. Mocking. Aisha's blood turned to ice. They whirled around. And there, standing in the shadows, smiling, was Malik Johnson. The devil smiles. Malik stepped forward, hands casually in his pockets. Behind him, 4 men with assault with rifles. He shook his head. You know, I gotta admit, he said, grinning. I really thought you'd be smarter than this, Ghost. Jamal's jaw tightened. Where is it? He demanded. Malik chuckled. You mean the little treasure hunt you set up? Yeah, that's gone. Wallace has it now. Aisha's breath hitched. Ryan whispered, Shit. Malik's eyes locked onto Ethan. And you, he said. You should have just let this die. Ethan didn't blink. Malik sighed, pulling a pistol from his waistband. Guess I gotta bury it myself. Bang, Aisha screamed. Jamal staggered back, gripping his side. Ryan opened. Fire. Chaos erupted. Ethan grabbed Aisha, throwing her behind cover. Bang! 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 Gunfire shredded through the air. Ryan dropped one of Malik's men before diving behind a rusted-out car. Jamal collapsed against the wall. Blood soaked his shirt. Aisha scrambled to him. Stay with me, Jamal coughed, his fingers gripping her arm. Aisha, he whispered. She shook her head. Don't talk like that. Aisha, he said again, his eyes locked on hers. Burn it all down. Her throat closed. And then, Malik's voice cut through the chaos. Enough. The gunfire stopped. Ethan's heart hammered. Aisha turned and froze, because Malik had his gun against Ryan's head. Ryan's jaw was clenched, blood dripping from his temple. Malik smirked. Here's how this plays out. He cocked the gun. You all die, right now. Aisha felt her world closing in. Ethan's muscles tensed. Jamal groaned in pain. And for the first time, it felt like they had lost. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey. Malik Johnson stood in the middle of the blood-stained auto shop, his pistol pressed against Ryan Fletcher's skull. The room reeked of gunpowder and sweat. Aisha Carter's hands were shaking. Jamal was bleeding out beside her. Ethan Calloway was still standing, gun raised but useless. Malik had the upper hand. You know, Malik mused, pressing the barrel harder against Ryan's temple. I actually respect you, Calloway. Most cops know when to back off. But you keep coming. Ryan gritted his teeth. That why you're gonna shoot me? Malik smirked. No, I'm gonna shoot you because you pissed me off. Aisha gasped. No, wait. Malik pulled the trigger. Bang! Ryan jerked. Then Malik staggered back, blood splattering the wall behind him. The gun dropped from his hand. Ryan blinked. He was still alive, because the bullet hadn't hit him. Malik grunted, gripping his shoulder, shot clean through. Ethan's gun was still smoking. His voice was ice cold. You talk too much. Hell breaks loose. The second Malik stumbled back, Ethan moved. Bang, bang. He shot twice more, dropping one of Malik's men before he could react. Ryan tore free, punching Malik across the face before diving for his gun. Aisha grabbed Jamal, dragging him behind a workbench. Gunfire erupted again. Bang, bang. Ryan and Ethan fired back, keeping Malik's men pinned. Jamal groaned. His skin was slick with sweat. Aisha pressed hard against his wound. Stay with me, Jamal gritted his teeth. I ain't done yet. Ethan reloaded. We need to move. Ryan fired another shot, hitting a guy in the leg. Yeah, no shit. Aisha's head snapped toward Malik. He was staggering to his feet, blood dripping from his arm. And for the first time, he looked afraid. Ethan saw it too. You feeling it now, Malik? He called. This is what losing feels like. Malik spat blood. Then, he smiled. You think you won? He sneered. Aisha felt a chill crawl up her spine. Because Malik wasn't scared, he was stalling, and that's when the doors burst open. They were waiting. More men poured in. Not street thugs, not Crips, cops. Ethan's stomach dropped. Ryan cursed. Son of a bitch. Captain Wallace stepped through the door, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete. His eyes swept the room, landing on Ethan. He sighed. Calloway, you just couldn't leave this alone, could you? Aisha's blood ran cold. This was it. This was who had been pulling the strings all along. Wallace turned to Malik. You good? Malik wiped the blood from his lip. I've been better. Wallace nodded. Then he pulled out his gun and pointed it at Ethan. Ethan didn't flinch. So this is how it is? Wallace cocked his head. Calloway, come on. You had to see this coming. This city isn't run by the badge. It's run by the people willing to do what's necessary. Aisha's hands tightened into fists. You kill us. People will know. Ryan growled. Wallace smirked. No, they won't. The official report? You resisted arrest, got yourselves killed in the process. Simple. Ethan exhaled slowly. He had one shot at this, one move. Aisha glanced at Jamal. He was fading fast. If they didn't end this now, none of them were making it out. Wallace aimed for Ethan's chest. Any last words? Ethan's voice was steady. Yeah. Then he threw his gun at Wallace's face. The final stand. The second Wallace flinched, Ethan charged. He slammed into Wallace, knocking him off balance. Ryan grabbed Aisha and Jamal, pulling them toward the door. Move! Malik fired. Bang! The bullet whizzed past Aisha's ear. Ethan wrestled with Wallace, punching him across the jaw. Ryan tackled another cop, stealing his gun. Aisha grabbed Jamal, forcing him to his feet. Come on, Jamal groaned. You're bossy when you're scared. Shut up and walk, Ethan broke free from Wallace's grip and ran toward them. Malik grabbed his gun, aimed right at Aisha. She froze. Malik's finger tightened on the trigger. Bang. Malik staggered. His gun clattered to the floor. Aisha gasped. Malik fell to his knees. A bullet wound in his chest. He blinked, his hands slick, with blood. He looked up and saw Jamal holding the gun. Jamal exhaled sharply. Told you I ain't done yet. Malik collapsed. Dead. Aisha let out a shaky breath. Ethan grabbed her arm. We have to go. They bolted for the door. Ryan covered them, shooting out a security light as they ran into the night. Wallace's shouts echoed behind them. Find them! But by the time his men scrambled outside, they were already gone. Nowhere left to hide. The SUV raced through the streets. Jamal was pale, bleeding out. Aisha pressed a hand to his wound. Stay awake. Jamal's eyelids fluttered. You're still. Bossy? Ryan looked back at Ethan. What now? Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. We end this. Ryan frowned. How? Ethan's eyes were cold. We burn Wallace's whole empire to the ground. Aisha felt her breath catch. Jamal smirked weakly. Now you're talking. The city lights blurred past them. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about justice. And Ethan Calloway? He wasn't running anymore. He was going to take them all down. Before we get started, share your location in the comments and enjoy the experience. Let's go. The SUV raced through the darkened streets of Los Angeles, headlights slicing through the thick fog rolling in from the bay. Ethan Calloway gripped the wheel like a man on the edge. Ryan Fletcher sat in the passenger seat, reloading his gun, while Aisha Carter pressed down on Jamal's bleeding wound in the back seat. Jamal let out a pained chuckle. I think I lost a little too much blood to be on the run right now. Aisha didn't smile. Shut up, Jamal. He smirked through the pain. Damn, baby. Missed you too. Ethan's voice cut through the tension. We need to get off the grid now. Ryan exhaled. Wallace won't stop until we're dead. LAPD, Malik's crew, what's left of them, every corrupt cop in this city is going to be hunting us. Ethan's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Then we stop. Running. Aisha frowned. What the hell does that mean? Ethan turned onto a side road, disappearing into the industrial district. It means we take the fight to them. A safe house that's not so safe. Ethan pulled up to a rundown warehouse near the port. Rusted shipping containers lined the lot, and the air smelled of salt water and oil. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Really? This is your big plan? Ethan killed the engine. This is an old sting house. No cameras, no surveillance. We lay low for a few hours, then we move. Aisha opened the back door, helping Jamal out. He gritted his teeth, leaning on her. You sure this place is safe? Ethan paused. For the first time tonight, he wasn't sure of anything. They made their way inside. The warehouse was mostly empty except for a few crates and a dusty table. Jamal collapsed into a chair with a groan. Yeah, real cozy. Aisha ripped a piece of cloth from her shirt, pressing it against his wound. "You're losing too much blood. We need a doctor." Jamal smirked. "What, no hospitals?" Ryan scoffed. "You want Wallace's guys to finish the job?" Jamal chuckled. "Good point." Ethan checked his gun. They needed a plan. Wallace had the evidence. The proof that linked him to Malik, the Crips, the corrupt LAPD network. Without it, they had nothing. They had one chance to take him down. And Ethan knew exactly where to start. "We hit Wallace where it hurts," Ethan said. Ryan frowned. "And where's that?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "His money. The weakest link, 4:12 a.m., downtown Los Angeles. The towering glass building stood quiet against the dark sky. Inside, David Kessler, Wallace's personal money launderer, sat at his desk, nursing a glass of whiskey. He wasn't a gangster. He wasn't a cop. He was just a numbers guy. And that made him the perfect target. Because men like Kessler, they folded fast. Ethan parked a few blocks away. "We do this quiet." Ryan loaded his silencer. "I like quiet." Aisha looked at Jamal. He was getting weaker. She turned to Ethan. "I stay with him." Ethan nodded. "If anything happens—" "I know," Aisha said. "Shoot first." Ethan and Ryan disappeared into the night. Cracking the safe Kessler's penthouse office was almost too easy to get into. Ethan picked the lock, slipping inside with Ryan at his back. The place smelled like money and expensive cologne. Kessler was at his desk, unaware, until Ethan pressed the barrel of his gun against his temple. "Don't move." Kessler froze. "Jesus Christ." Ryan closed the blinds. "Relax, Dave. We just want to talk." Kessler swallowed. "If this is about Wallace—" Ethan tightened his grip. "It is." Kessler's breathing turned shaky. "Look, man, I just handle the accounts. I don't get involved in—" Ryan cut him off. Yeah, we know. You're just a numbers guy, right?" Kessler nodded. Ryan leaned in. "Then here's the thing, Dave. You help us, you live. You don't?" Ryan pulled out his knife, sticking it into the desk inches from Kessler's hand. "Then we take a finger every 5 minutes." Kessler turned pale. "Jesus, okay, what do you want?" Ethan's voice was calm. "Where does Wallace keep his backups?" Kessler hesitated. Ryan grabbed his wrist. "Wait," Kessler blurted. "There's a safe house downtown. Wallace has backups of all the files. The transactions, but it's locked down. High security." Ethan exchanged a look with Ryan. They had what they needed. Ethan leaned down. "You ever hear that saying about the weak link, Dave?" Kessler nodded frantically. Ethan smirked. "Good. Because you just broke." Ryan knocked him out cold. The endgame begins. Ethan and Ryan sped back to the warehouse. Aisha was still with Jamal, who looked even worse than before. "We got it," Ethan said. "We know where Wallace keeps his evidence." Aisha looked up. "Where?" Ethan loaded a fresh magazine. "A safe house, high security." Ryan smirked. "And, we're gonna break in." Jamal let out a weak laugh. "You're insane." Ethan met his gaze. "Yeah." Aisha's hands clenched. This was it, the final move. And if they failed, none of them would live to see the sunrise. The air inside the warehouse safe house was thick with tension. Jamal Carter was fading fast. His breathing was uneven, his skin slick with sweat. Aisha Carter knelt beside him, pressing down on his wound, trying to keep him conscious. Ryan Fletcher paced the room, checking his ammo. Ethan Calloway stood by the window, his gaze locked on the city skyline. He could feel it. The war was coming to a head, and they only had one shot to end it. Aisha's voice cut through the silence. "Jamal won't make it much longer." Ethan turned to her. Aisha's eyes were red, exhausted, but still burning with fight. Still burning. "We need to do this now." Ryan exhaled. "Agreed. We don't have time for a perfect plan." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we make it messy." Ryan smirked. "Now you're speaking my language." Breaking and entering, 3:58 a.m., downtown Los Angeles. The safe house wasn't some dingy hideout, it was a fortress. A sleek, unmarked building nestled between luxury condos and high-end offices. The perfect place to hide something in plain sight. Ryan whistled. Damn, Wallace really went all out. Ethan's eyes scanned the building. Armed guards at the entrance, more on the rooftop. This wasn't going to be easy. Aisha bit her lip. How do we even get inside? Ethan exhaled. We create a distraction. Ryan grinned. Oh, I love distractions. Ethan looked at Aisha. You drive. Aisha blinked. What? Ethan tossed her the keys. You're going to crash a car through the front door. Aisha's eyes widened. Are you out of your damn mind? Ethan shrugged. We need a way in. Ryan grinned. I call shotgun. Chaos at the gate. Aisha's hands shook on the wheel. The stolen sedan idled at the curb, headlights off. The guards at the entrance were chatting, oblivious to what was coming. Ryan checked his watch. On my signal. Ethan was already in position, crouched behind a parked van a block away. Aisha licked her lips. She had never done anything like this. This is insane, she muttered. Ryan smirked. Yep, and it's gonna be fun. Then, he counted down. 3, 2, 1. Go. Aisha slammed the gas. The engine roared to life. The guard spun around. Too late. Crash! The car plowed through the front entrance, shattering glass, slamming into the security desk. Aisha's body jerked violently as the airbag deployed. Ryan was already out of the car, guns blazing. Ethan moved in from the side, taking down the outside. Guards. Alarms blared. They were inside. The vault. The building was a maze of hallways and security doors. Ethan led the way, moving fast. Ryan grabbed a radio off a dead guard, listening in. More incoming, he muttered. We gotta move. Aisha's head was still spinning from the crash. Where's the evidence? Jamal had said Wallace kept backups, and Ethan had a pretty good idea where. The basement, Ethan said. They moved fast. Gunfire erupted behind them. Ryan covered their escape, taking down 2 more guards. Ethan reached the basement door, locked. Aisha grabbed a fallen guard's ID. Try. This. The scanner blinked green. Click. The door swung open. Ethan led them inside. And there, at the far end of the room, was the vault. Ryan exhaled. Jackpot. Ethan moved to the keypad. Cover me. Aisha frowned. Can you crack it? Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a small explosive. Charge. Aisha's stomach dropped. Oh, come on. Boom. The vault door buckled inward, inside. Rows of hard drives, files, money, and sitting on the top shelf, a black ledger. Ryan grabbed it. He flipped through the pages, his face going pale. This is it, he whispered. This has everything. Wallace. Malik. Every cop and politician on the take. It was the smoking gun. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. Then let's get out of here. The final betrayal. They raced upstairs. Gunfire echoed through the halls. Ryan checked the stairwell. Clear. They burst into the lobby, only to freeze, because, standing there, gun raised, was Captain Wallace. Aisha's breath hitched. Wallace's expression was calm, controlled. You really should have let this go, Calloway. Ethan didn't lower his gun. That ledger is going public, Wallace. It's over. Wallace chuckled. Is it? Then he snapped his fingers. The side door swung open, and 6 cops stepped inside, guns drawn. Ethan's stomach dropped. Ryan muttered. Shit. Wallace smiled. You see, Calloway, you don't win against people like me. We write the rules. And you? He cocked his gun. You just ran out of time. Aisha's chest tightened. Ryan gritted his teeth. Ethan stared death in the face. They were outnumbered. No way out. And then, bang! Wallace jerked forward. A red stain blossomed on his chest. He staggered, eyes wide in shock. Bang! Bang! More shots. The dirty cops collapsed one by one. Ethan whirled around, and there, standing in the doorway, gun smoking, was Jamal. Aisha gasped. Jamal? Jamal grinned weakly, blood still dripping from his side. Y'all really thought I was gonna sit this one out? Wallace collapsed to the floor, choking on his own blood. He looked up at Ethan, and for the first time, he looked afraid. You don't win, Wallace gasped. Ethan crouched beside him. Yeah? He held up the ledger, then explained this to the press. Wallace's eyes went blank. Dead. Ryan exhaled. Jesus. Aisha's knees nearly gave out. Jamal smirked. Told you, I ain't done yet. Ethan checked his watch. It was 4:56 a.m. Sunrise was coming, and by the time it did, Los Angeles would never be the same again. The sun was rising over Los Angeles, casting long golden streaks over the city skyline. And inside the wreckage of Wallace's safe house, Ethan Calloway stood over the dead body of the most corrupt cop in the city. Ryan Fletcher lowered his gun. The fight was over, but Aisha Carter knew better. It wasn't over. Not yet. The fallout begins. The SUV raced through the empty streets, tires screeching as Ethan weaved through red lights. They needed distance. Fast. Jamal Carter was slumped in the back seat, his breath shallow. Aisha kept pressure on his wound, whispering under her breath, You're not dying. You hear me? Jamal smirked weakly. Damn, baby. Didn't know you cared this much. Aisha's throat tightened. Shut up, Jamal. Ryan, in the passenger seat, checked the blood-stained ledger in his lap. This thing is gonna bury a lot of people. Ethan's jaw clenched. That's the plan. Aisha looked up. And then what? We send it to the press, the feds? Ryan exhaled. Yeah, and then we get the hell out of Dodge before the city burns down. Aisha's stomach twisted, because something told her this wasn't going to be that simple. The war for control somewhere in South LA, 5:22 a.m. A. Black Escalade idled in an alleyway. The backseat was silent, until a phone rang. A hand picked it up. A deep, gravelly voice answered. Talk? The voice on the other end was frantic. Wallace is dead. Silence. The man in the Escalade exhaled slowly. Then, he smiled. Good. He ended the call. And then he turned to his driver. Tell the crew, he said, voice calm. LA belongs to us now. The driver nodded. And the real war began. Aisha's dilemma. The safe house was a cheap motel off the 110 freeway. Jamal was getting weaker by the second. Ethan slammed the SUV into park. Ryan, get inside. Find a med kit. Ryan nodded and ran in. Aisha stayed with Jamal. His fingers brushed over hers. Hey. She swallowed. What? His smile was weak. You saved my ass tonight. Aisha looked away, because the truth was, she wasn't sure if she had. Jamal winced. You should have run when you had the chance, Aisha. Her voice was tight. And leave you? Jamal chuckled. I'd have understood. Aisha's eyes burned. And then, she surprised herself. She grabbed his hand and held on. The trap is set. Ryan came back with a med kit and a burner phone. Ethan took the phone and dialed a number. Aisha frowned. Who are you calling? Ethan's face was unreadable. The feds. Ryan's head snapped up. The hell? Ethan's voice was calm. We're burning the whole system down. If we don't leak this to someone bigger, Wallace's people will bury it. Ryan exhaled. And you trust the feds? Ethan smirked. Not even a little bit. But he didn't have a choice. He hit dial. And the line rang. The beginning of the end. The ledger was out. By sunrise, reporters would be swarming LAPD headquarters. Names would be exposed. LA would never be the same. But Ethan knew. Corruption didn't just die. It fought back, and the war wasn't over yet, not even close. The first news report hit the airwaves at 6:03 a.m. By 6:15 a.m., half the city knew. By 6:30 a.m., all hell had broken loose. The LAPD was in chaos. The mayor's office was scrambling. And inside a crappy motel room, Ethan Calloway, Ryan Fletcher, Aisha Carter, and Jamal Carter were running out of time. The aftermath of a bombshell. The motel TV flickered, news anchors looking rattled. Leaked documents suggest years of corruption inside the LAPD, linked to organized crime. Allegations against high-ranking officers, including the late Captain Wallace. Protests are already forming outside City Hall. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, expression unreadable. Ryan exhaled. Well, that escalated fast. Jamal, still weak from blood loss, smirked. Told y'all. The city was built on lies. Aisha wasn't listening. She was staring at her phone. Ryan frowned. What? She turned the screen. A text. Message. No number. Just 2 words. Too late. Aisha's stomach turned to ice. She looked up. They're coming. The streets turned to war. South LA, 7:12 a.m. The Crips, Bloods, and every crew in the city smelled blood in the water. Wallace was dead. The cops were scrambling. The whole power structure was collapsing. And now, it was open season. Malik Johnson's old crew was out for revenge. The cops who still backed Wallace, they wanted to clean up loose ends. And the real players, the ones behind all of it, they weren't done yet. Nowhere left to run. The SUV sped through the burning streets. Aisha's hands were trembling. Where the hell are we going? Ethan's eyes didn't leave the road. Somewhere we can finish this. Ryan checked the rear view. We got company. Aisha turned, her stomach dropped. 3 unmarked SUVs were closing in. Ryan exhaled. LAPD or gangbangers? Ethan's grip tightened. Doesn't matter, they want us dead either way. Jamal groaned in the back seat. So what's the move? Ethan's voice was calm. We fight. Aisha's breath hitched. You can't be serious. Ethan turned the wheel and sent the SUV barreling toward the nearest alley. Ryan cocked his gun. I hate this plan. Yeah, Ethan muttered. Me too. The last stand begins. The SUV skidded to a stop in an abandoned lot. The black SUVs blocked the exits. Men poured out. Cops, gangsters, mercenaries. Aisha's heart pounded. This was it. Ethan checked his ammo. Ryan loaded his last magazine. Jamal, barely able to stand, still managed to grip his pistol. Aisha felt sick, but then she grabbed a gun too. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Aisha's hands were shaking, but her voice, steady. If we die, she said, I'm taking some of them with me. Ethan smirked. Now you're talking. The enemy closed in. The war was here, and there was no way out. The air was electric, charged with death. Ethan Calloway stood at the front, gun raised, heart steady. Ryan Fletcher crouched beside him, muttering under his breath. You ever think we should have just retired early? Jamal Carter leaned against a rusted dumpster, barely standing. You could have, cop. But me? I was never getting out clean. Aisha Carter clutched the pistol in her trembling hands. And surrounding them, death in every direction. Unmarked police SUVs, armed mercenaries, gangbangers who didn't care whose side they were on, as long as there was money in it. Ethan counted at least 12 guns aimed at them. A man in a gray suit stepped forward. Not a cop. Not a gangster. Something worse. Corporate. Cold. Professional. He adjusted his tie. Ethan Calloway, Ryan Fletcher, Jamal Carter, and the lovely Aisha. Aisha's stomach turned. He knew their names. Ethan didn't blink. And who the hell are you? The man smiled. The one who really runs this city. Silence. Then he said 2 more words. Kill them. The first shot rang out. The battle for survival. Bang, bang, bang. Gunfire ripped through the alleyway. Ethan dove behind cover, bullets shredding the pavement where he had just been standing. Ryan returned fire, dropping one of the mercenaries before ducking behind a wrecked car. Jamal, bleeding, barely conscious, still managed to fire off 2 shots, hitting another man in the chest. Aisha pressed herself against the dumpster, heart pounding. She couldn't breathe. Too much. Too fast. Then she heard Ethan's voice. "Aisha, breathe. Keep your hand steady." She gasped for air, focused, and then she fired. Bang. One of the shooters stumbled back, clutching his stomach. She had hit him. Her hands still shook, but now she was fighting. Jamal's last stand. Jamal Carter knew one thing. He wasn't making it out of this. His vision was blurry, his legs barely working. Too much blood lost. But if he was going down, he wasn't going alone. He saw one of the mercs reloading. Jamal pushed off the dumpster, stumbling forward. The guy turned too slow. Jamal slammed into him, wrestling the gun away. Bang, bang. 2 more bodies hit the pavement. Jamal gasped, blood spilling from his lips. Aisha saw him falter. "Jamal!" He turned to her, smiling weakly. "Go!" Aisha's heart split in 2. "No!" But then, a shot rang out. Jamal jerked. His body crashed to the ground. Blood pooled beneath him. Aisha screamed. Ethan felt something snap inside him. Ryan emptied his entire clip. But Jamal Carter was gone. No more running. Aisha wasn't thinking anymore. She stood up from cover. Ryan grabbed her arm. "Aisha, don't," she fired. Bang! Bang! The man who shot Jamal dropped. Then, she turned the gun to the man in the gray suit. Ethan moved fast. Before she could pull the trigger, he grabbed her wrist. "Not him," Ethan whispered. Aisha was shaking. He's the reason Jamal's dead." Ethan's voice was ice. "Not yet." The gunfight was ending. Bodies littered the alley. The man in the gray suit held up his hands, smirking. "You think you won?" he asked. Ethan's jaw clenched. "We're still breathing." The man laughed. "Calloway, this city is bigger than you. Wallace was a pawn. Malik was a pawn. You don't even know who you're really fighting." Aisha's stomach turned. Ethan pressed the barrel of his gun against the man's forehead. "You talk too much." The man didn't flinch. "You kill me, someone worse replaces me. It never ends." Ethan stared at him. Then, he lowered his gun. Ryan frowned. Ethan didn't look away. "You're right." He pulled out his phone and started recording. "Say that again." The man in the suit froze, and for the first time, he looked afraid. "The city burns, 7:48 a.m. The footage spread like wildfire. By 8 a.m. it was playing on every news station. By 8:30 a.m. protesters were marching on the LAPD headquarters. By 9:00 a.m. every dirty cop still standing was running for their lives. The war was over. But for Ethan Calloway, Aisha Carter, and Ryan Fletcher, it didn't feel like a victory. Not with Jamal gone. The road ahead. Aisha stood at the edge of the city, looking out over the chaos. Ryan leaned against the SUV. "We should be dead?" Ethan exhaled. "Yeah." Aisha turned to them. "What now?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "We disappear." Ryan smirked. "I like that plan." Aisha looked at the city one last time. Then she got into the car. Ethan drove. And Los Angeles kept burning. The city was still on fire. News stations were in full meltdown mode. LAPD officers were resigning by the hour. Arrests were happening in real time. Every name in Wallace's ledger was being exposed. And yet, Ethan Calloway didn't feel like they had won. Because Jamal Carter was still dead. Because the city was still broken. Because the war never really ended. The SUV rolled down a lonely desert highway, dust kicking up behind it. Ryan Fletcher leaned against the window, staring at the endless stretch of road. "So, where the hell are we going?" Ethan didn't answer. Aisha Carter sat in the seat, her arms crossed, jaw tight. She hadn't spoken since they left Los Angeles. She had spent her life running from this world. Now she had nothing left to run to. Jamal was gone, and she wasn't sure who she was without him. Ryan sighed. "Look, I'm all for disappearing, but we need a plan. Ethan finally spoke. We go south. Aisha glanced up. South where? Ethan's fingers tightened on the wheel. Mexico. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Seriously? Ethan's voice was flat. We need to vanish. Mexico's the best option. No extradition. Aisha's stomach twisted. You're talking like we're criminals. Ethan's jaw clenched. We are. Silence. Ryan exhaled. Hell of a retirement plan. Aisha turned toward the window, watching the road disappear behind them. For the first time, she wondered, did they really escape? Or were they just running toward another kind of prison? Loose Ends, Los Angeles, 9:37. And the city was still unraveling, but inside a hidden penthouse, a man in a dark suit watched the news, sipping a glass of whiskey. A knock on the door. He didn't turn. Come in. The door opened. A shadow stepped inside. A low voice spoke. It's done. Wallace is dead. The ledger is out. The man in the suit smiled. Good. He swirled his drink. And Calloway? A pause. The voice hesitated. He's gone. Off the grid. The man exhaled. Then he turned to the window. Find him. The voice was quiet. And if he doesn't want to be found? The man in the suit smirked. Then make him wish he was. Nowhere is safe. Aisha sat outside the motel, staring at the sunrise. She hadn't slept. Ryan was passed out in the SUV. Ethan was inside, making calls. And Aisha? She was thinking about Jamal, his laugh, his voice, the way he used to tell her, one day we're getting out of this. But he never did. Now she was free, and she had no idea what to do with it. Ethan stepped outside. We leave in an hour. Aisha didn't move. You ever think about what's next? She murmured. Ethan sighed. No. Aisha looked at him. Maybe you should. Ethan didn't answer. Because he already knew the truth. There was no next. There was only survival. The past catches up. The burner phone in Ethan's pocket buzzed. His stomach tightened. Only 3 people had this number. One of them was dead. He answered. A voice he never expected to hear again spoke. Calloway, long time. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew that, oh. Royce. It belonged to a man who was supposed to be buried. Thought you were dead, Ethan said. A dark chuckle. Yeah. So did a lot of people. A pause. Then, you should have stayed gone, Ethan. The call ended. Ethan stood completely still. Aisha frowned. Who was that? Ethan's voice was quiet. The real problem. The game isn't over. Aisha's heart pounded. Ryan woke up, rubbing his eyes. What's going on? Ethan turned. We're not going to Mexico. Ryan groaned. Oh, what now? Ethan's face was stone. They're still coming. Aisha felt a chill crawl up her spine. Jamal had warned her. This wasn't about the Crips. This wasn't about Wallace. This was bigger. And now? They were in deeper than ever. Ryan grabbed his gun. So what do we do? Ethan exhaled. Then, for the first time, he smiled. We stop running. 5:15 a.m. Border of California and Mexico. The sun was creeping over the horizon, casting a dull orange glow over the vast, empty stretch of road ahead. The SUV rumbled down the dusty highway, the worn-out tires eating up the miles between them and Los Angeles. But they weren't running anymore. They were baiting the hook. Inside the car, Aisha Carter sat in the back seat, her fingers tight around the gun resting in her lap. She had spent the last few hours in a haze, replaying Jamal's death over and over. Every gunshot, every drop of blood. The look in his eyes when he told her to burn it all. Down. She had wanted to run. But Ethan Calloway, he had other plans. How long until we get there? Ryan Fletcher asked, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. Ethan, eyes locked on the road, barely glanced at the clock. 30 minutes. Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. This is a mistake. Ethan didn't respond. Aisha finally spoke. You really think this guy's gonna meet us? Ethan's jaw tightened. He will. Aisha's stomach twisted. And if he doesn't? Ethan gripped the wheel harder. Then we're already dead. Silence. Ryan let out a slow breath. I hate this plan. Ethan smirked. You've said that about every plan. Ryan shook his head. Yeah, but this one might be the dumbest. Aisha leaned forward. Tell me again why we're going back toward the city instead of disappearing. Ethan's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Because whoever called me last night isn't just some random threat. Ryan frowned. You gonna tell us who he is? Ethan exhaled. His name is Vincent Kane. Aisha froze. Ryan blinked. Wait, as in? Ethan nodded. Yeah, that Vincent Kane. Aisha's pulse spiked. Vincent Kane wasn't just another corrupt cop. He was the architect of half the deals that had kept LA's underworld thriving for the past 20 years. And he was supposed to be dead. Aisha licked her lips. Why the hell would he call you? Ethan's voice was flat. Because I used to work for him. Ryan's head snapped toward him. Excuse me? Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened. He was my commanding officer. Taught me everything I know. Aisha felt a chill crawl down her spine. Ryan let out a sharp laugh. You worked for Vincent Kane? The guy who made Wallace look like a damn rookie? Ethan didn't deny it. Aisha clenched her jaw. And you didn't think to tell us this earlier? Ethan's voice was calm. Would it have changed anything? Aisha stared at him. Yes. Ethan glanced at her through the mirror. Too late now. The words hung between them. Ryan folded his arms. So let me get this straight. We're not just going after Wallace's people. We're going after the guy who ran all of them. Ethan nodded. Ryan whistled. Yeah, I really hate this plan. 6:02 a.m. The ghost returns. The meetup spot was a deserted roadside diner, long abandoned, its neon open 24 hours sign flickering weakly despite the broken windows and boarded-up doors. Ethan pulled the SUV into the lot, killing the engine. Silence. Aisha's fingers tightened around the gun in her lap. This feels like a setup. Ethan exhaled. Because it is. Ryan cursed under his breath. So what now? Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt. We go inside. Ryan grabbed his gun. And if Kane decides to kill us instead of talk? Ethan smirked. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. The man in the dark inside the diner, the air was thick with dust and decay. Ethan, Ryan, and Aisha moved carefully, scanning every dark corner. Then, a voice. Calloway. Ethan turned. And there, sitting at a booth in the back, sipping a cup of coffee like he had all the time in the world, was Vincent Kane. He looked older than Ethan remembered, but his eyes, still the same, cold, calculating, the eyes of a man who had never lost a fight. Kane smirked. Been a while, kid. Ethan didn't move. You're supposed to be dead. Kane chuckled. Yeah, well, I'm not. Ryan tensed beside Ethan. You gonna tell us why the hell we're here? Kane took another sip of coffee. Then he set the cup down and pulled out a file. He slid it across the table. Ethan didn't take his eyes off him as he picked it up. Inside were photos. Wallace, Malik, Jamal, even Ethan himself. Aisha's breath hitched. This is surveillance, she whispered. Kane nodded. You think I didn't know what you were doing? Ethan clenched his jaw. What do you want? Kane smiled. To offer you a deal. Ryan scoffed. We're not making a deal with you. Kane ignored him. You walk away right now? I let you live. Silence. Aisha felt sick. Ethan's voice was steady. And if we don't? Kane smiled wider. Then I bury you, like I did Wallace, like I did Malik, like I did every other fool who thought they could change this city. Aisha's stomach twisted. Ryan's hand tightened on his gun. Ethan stared at Kane for a long moment. Then, he closed the file. and slid it back. Keep it. Kane raised an eyebrow. Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. I'm not walking away. Kane smirked. Figured you'd say that. Then, he snapped his fingers. The back door of the diner swung open, and 5 armed men stepped inside, guns raised. Aisha's pulse spiked. Kane leaned back in his seat, completely relaxed. Looks like you just ran out of time, Calloway. Ethan exhaled. Then, he smiled. Not yet. And before Kane could react, Ethan flipped the table. Gunfire erupted. And the real war began. 6:05 a.m., the diner turns into a war zone. The table flipped over, knocking Kane's coffee onto the floor. Gunfire erupted instantly. Ethan Calloway dove for cover, drawing his gun as bullets ripped through the air. Ryan Fletcher fired back, dropping the first gunman before he could react. Aisha. Carter's ears were ringing, her heart pounding. She ducked behind a counter, gripping her gun so tightly her knuckles went white. Kane wasn't running. He sat there smiling, watching the chaos unfold like a man who already knew how this would end. Ethan reloaded. Ryan, move left. Ryan darted. Behind a booth, firing 3 shots. 2 missed, 1 didn't. Another mercenary collapsed, clutching his stomach. Kane's remaining men regrouped, pressing forward. Ethan cursed. They weren't just street thugs, they were trained. Aisha saw movement to her right, a man with an assault rifle stepping. Through the back door, her breath hitched. He hadn't seen her yet. She had a clear shot. Her fingers trembled. Then, she fired. Bang! The man jerked back, blood splattering against the wall. Aisha's stomach churned. She had just killed someone. There was no coming back from this, but she didn't have time to think. Because Kane's last gunman was aiming for Ethan, Aisha didn't hesitate. She fired again. Bang! The mercenary collapsed. Silence. The gunfire stopped. And just like that, it was over. Kane's endgame. The smell of gunpowder and blood filled the diner. Ethan stood up slowly, gun still. Aimed at Kane. Kane didn't look worried. He adjusted his jacket, exhaling. Damn shame. I like this suit. Ryan wiped sweat from his forehead. Shut up. Kane smirked. That how it is, Fletcher? After all we did for you? Ryan's stomach dropped. Aisha's eyes widened. Ethan's jaw tightened. What? Kane leaned back, crossing his arms. You didn't tell them, Ryan? Ryan didn't move. Kane chuckled. You really think he's just been your sidekick this whole time? Ethan's grip on his gun tightened. Ryan. Ryan finally spoke. He's lying. Kane grinned. Am I? Aisha's heart pounded. Ryan, what the hell is he talking about? Ryan didn't answer. Kane tapped his fingers on the table. Come on, Calloway. You really think Ryan Fletcher just happened to stick by your side through all this? That he didn't have his own deals? Ethan felt ice creep up his spine. He turned to Ryan. Tell me he's lying. Ryan's jaw clenched, and that's when Ethan knew. His stomach dropped. Ryan finally sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not what you think. Aisha took a step back. Oh my God. Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. Start talking. Ryan looked away. I made a deal, he muttered. Long time ago. Aisha's breath hitched. Ryan swallowed hard. Before Wallace went down, before Malik got killed, I thought I could control it, play both sides. Ethan felt rage boiling inside him. You were working for Kane? Ryan exhaled sharply. I was keeping us alive. Aisha's voice was shaky. Jamal died because of this, and you... She stopped, shaking her head. You let it happen. Ryan flinched. I didn't want him to die. Ethan's hands shook. He had trusted Ryan. He had trusted him. Kane was still smiling. Ethan snapped. He grabbed Kane by the collar, slamming him into the wall. You set all of this up, Ethan growled. Wallace, Malik, us. You let them fight while you sat back and waited to pick up the pieces. Kane didn't flinch. Of course I did. Ethan's fingers tightened. Give me one reason I shouldn't put a bullet in your skull." Cain laughed softly. Then he whispered, "Because you'll never make it out of here alive if you do." Ethan stilled. Cain's voice was calm, certain. "I still have people out there, Calloway. More than you can count. You think this is over? This is just the beginning." Aisha's stomach twisted. Cain's eyes flicked to Ryan. "And Fletcher knows I'm right." Ethan's pulse pounded. Ryan looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Aisha's hands were shaking. "This is insane," she whispered. Ethan pressed the barrel of his gun against Cain's forehead. "Give me one good reason not to kill you right now." Cain smiled. "You already know why." Ethan stared at him, and he realized the truth. Cain wanted him to pull the trigger. He was still playing the game. If Ethan killed him now, the story would change. Cain's people would hunt them forever. They'd become the villains. And Cain would become a martyr. Ethan exhaled sharply. Then he lowered his gun. Cain's smile widened. "Smart choice." Ethan leaned in. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Then he slammed the butt of his gun against Cain's temple. Cain's head snapped back. He collapsed, unconscious. Ryan let out a breath. "So now what?" Ethan turned to him and punched him across the face. Ryan stumbled back, clutching his jaw. "Jesus, man. That's for lying," Ethan growled. Ryan sighed, rubbing his face. "I deserved that." Aisha crossed her arms. "You deserve worse." Ethan took a slow breath. Then he turned toward the exit. "We're not done yet." Aisha frowned. "Where are we going?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "To finish this." Ryan wiped blood from his mouth. "You sure about that?" Ethan met his gaze. For the first time in a long time, he exhaled. "Yeah." Aisha glanced down at Cain's unconscious body, and for the first time, she wasn't scared anymore. This wasn't about survival. This was about justice. And by the time the sun fully rose over Los Angeles, they were going to burn it all down. 6:32 a.m., the deserted highway. The SUV sped down the empty road, dust kicking up behind it as the sun rose over Los Angeles. Ethan Calloway's grip on the wheel was tight enough to crack bone. Aisha Carter sat in the back seat, staring blankly out the window. Her hands were still shaking. The weight of everything, Jamal's death, Ryan's betrayal, Cain's games, pressed down on her like a vice. Ryan Fletcher sat in the passenger seat, silent. A fresh bruise darkened his jaw where Ethan had punched him. He knew he deserved worse. But right now, there were bigger problems. Ethan's voice finally broke the silence. "We take him to the feds." Ryan scoffed. "The feds? After everything we've seen? You really think they're clean?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "We don't have a choice." Aisha's voice was quiet. "You think they'll actually lock Cain up?" Ethan didn't answer, because he wasn't sure. And that scared him more than anything. The devil wakes up. In the back of the SUV, Vincent Cain stirred. His head lolled to the side, blood drying against his temple from where Ethan had knocked him out. Then, his eyes snapped open, and he smiled. "You boys really think this is over?" Aisha tensed. Ryan turned in his seat. "Shut up, Cain." Cain smirked. "You're scared. I can see it." Ethan said nothing. Cain exhaled slowly, stretching as much as the zip ties around his wrists would allow. "Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna drive me to whatever pathetic government office you think can take me down. You'll hand me over. You'll think you won." A pause. Then, he leaned forward. "And in 3 days I'll walk out the front door. And I'll come for you." Aisha's stomach turned. Ethan's knuckles went white against the steering wheel. Ryan loaded his gun. "You're really that confident?" Cain grinned. "I don't have to be, because I know how this city works. People like me don't go away, Calloway. We just adjust." Aisha felt sick. Cain's voice dropped to a whisper. You should have shot me when you had the chance. Ethan's jaw tensed, because Kane was right. If they handed him over, he'd find a way out. If they let him live, he'd come for them. So what the hell were they supposed to do? Ryan leaned forward, voice low. Ethan, I know what you're thinking. Ethan didn't answer. Ryan's voice tightened. You can't. Not like this. Ethan exhaled. Then, finally, he made a choice. He turned, the wheel sharply veering off the main road. Aisha's stomach lurched. What the hell? Ryan's eyes widened. Ethan, where are you? But Ethan already knew. This wasn't about justice anymore. This was about ending it. For good. 6:48 a.m., the abandoned quarry. The SUV rumbled to a stop, dust swirling. In the early morning light, the quarry was massive. A deep open pit carved into the earth with steep drop-offs and jagged rock formations. A graveyard for secrets. Aisha climbed out, heart hammering. Ethan, what are we doing here? Ethan opened the back door, yanking Kane out by the collar. Kane barely stumbled before regaining his composure. He looked around and laughed. Oh, he chuckled. So this is how it ends? Ethan's voice was cold. You don't get to walk away from this. Kane smirked. You sure about that? Ethan pulled his gun. Aisha gasped. Ethan. Ryan stepped forward. Calloway, think about this. Ethan's hand didn't shake. I have. Kane grinned. Go on then. Pull the trigger. Be just like me. Aisha's chest tightened. Ryan's voice was low, urgent. You do this, Ethan? You don't come back. Ethan's breathing slowed. Kane's eyes glinted. You don't have the balls. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. Silence. Then, Aisha moved. She stepped between them, blocking the gun. Ethan's hands shook. Move. Aisha's eyes burned. No. Ethan's vision blurred. He could see it. Jamal, bleeding out. The city rotting. The corruption never ending, and Kane was still smiling. Ethan's breath came ragged. His grip on the gun wavered. Aisha's voice softened. If you do this, you're no better than him. Ethan exhaled sharply, and he lowered the gun. Kane's smirk widened. Told you. Then, Ryan pistol whipped him. Kane collapsed. Ryan shrugged. Sorry, that was for me. Aisha let out a breath. Ethan turned away. Let's go. Ryan frowned. What about him? Ethan didn't look back. He can find his own way out. Kane groaned, barely conscious. You're making a mistake. Ethan opened the SUV door. Maybe. Then, he drove away, leaving Vincent Kane in the dirt, under the rising sun. 7:15 a.m., the road ahead. The SUV rolled down the empty highway. Aisha stared at her reflection in the window. Ryan leaned back, arms crossed. So, that's it? Ethan kept his eyes on the road. That's it. Aisha exhaled. What now? Ethan didn't answer right away. Then, he glanced at her through the mirror. You tell me. Aisha looked back at the road. For the first time in her life, she didn't know. And maybe that was okay. Because this time, she wasn't running. 7:45 a.m., the edge of Los Angeles. The city was behind them. The open road stretched ahead, endless and uncertain. Ethan Calloway kept both hands on the wheel, his gaze locked forward. The weight of everything. Jamal's death, Ryan's betrayal, Kane's games, pressed down on him. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't in years. Clarity. Aisha Carter sat in the back seat, arms crossed, staring out at the horizon. She had spent her whole life running from the past. Now she had no idea where she was supposed to go. Ryan Fletcher leaned against the window, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. Nobody spoke, because nobody knew what came next. Ghosts that don't rest. The SUV rolled into a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. No police sirens, no gunfire, just the smell of coffee and cigarettes drifting from the open door. Ethan pulled into the parking lot, We need to lay low, just for a little while. Ryan stretched. Lay low? We just burned half of LA to the ground. You think we can just order eggs and pretend none of this happened? Ethan killed the engine. We're about to find out. Aisha sighed. I could eat. Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. Unbelievable. They stepped inside. A waitress barely looked up as they slid into a booth. Aisha grabbed a menu, her fingers still shaking slightly. Ryan rubbed his face. We should be halfway to Mexico. Ethan sipped his water. We're not running anymore. Ryan scoffed. So what? We sit here and wait for Kane's people to find us? Aisha looked up. Kane's not our problem anymore. Ryan stared at her. You really believe that? She didn't answer. Because deep down, she wasn't sure. But what she did know? They had a choice now, for the first time in their lives. What happens next? The TV in the corner flickered. A news anchor's voice filled the diner. The city remains in chaos after the shocking revelations of police corruption and organized crime. Multiple high-ranking officers have been arrested, and more are expected to face charges. Meanwhile, authorities are still searching for former Detective Ethan Calloway, who is suspected of leaking the explosive documents that took down LAPD's inner circle. Sources say Ethan tuned it out. Ryan chuckled. We're famous. Aisha stirred her coffee. Famous or hunted? Ryan grinned. Both. Ethan set his glass down. Doesn't matter. We're still breathing. Ryan smirked. For now? Aisha shook her head. So what now? We just disappear? Ethan looked at her. You tell me. Aisha swallowed hard. She thought about Jamal, everything he had fought for, everything he had lost, and she realized he wouldn't want her to keep running. She exhaled, meeting Ethan's gaze. We start over. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Start over how? Aisha's voice was steady. We fix what's broken. Ethan studied her. Then he nodded. Okay. A new beginning outside. The sun climbed higher. Los Angeles was burning, but rebuilding. And for the first time in a long time, so were they. Ryan stretched. All right, one last question. Ethan sighed. What? Ryan smirked. How the hell are we paying for this meal? Ethan and Aisha stared at him. Then they laughed. Because maybe, just maybe, they had a future after all.